Witness is Eric Fanning, President and CEO of AIA. Mr. Fanning, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Obernolte and Ranking Member Fushi. Thank you for inviting me to discuss the serious challenges posed by this proposed rule. First, let me begin by emphasizing our industry's deep commitment to sustainability. U.S. aviation manufacturers pledged to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Today, manufacturers are building more efficient planes and more sustainable propulsion. They are also minimizing the impact of the manufacturing process and advancing the use of sustainable aviation fuels. Our companies are working daily to reduce their environmental footprint, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because the market and our customers demand it. We strive to work closely with the federal government to achieve these goals, including supporting appropriate disclosure of climate-related information, including GHG and climate-related financial risks, in accordance with the Executive Order on Climate-Related Financial Risk. But the proposed FAR greenhouse gas emissions rule, while well-intended, is not executable for the American aerospace and defense industry. Under this proposal, federal contractors would be required to disclose emissions and set emission reduction targets based on the standards set by the Science-Based Targets Initiative, or SBTI, an international non-governmental entity. This is applicable to direct and indirect emissions, or Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, which can be challenging enough. However, the greatest challenge comes from disclosing Scope 3 emissions, the emissions created by suppliers and end users, including the emissions generated by aircraft when the airlines or the military fly them. For A&D companies, especially small businesses, accurately assessing Scope 3 emissions is a complex, long-range problem that they do not have the capacity or capability to execute. Furthermore, SBTI does not have sector-based guidance for all industries, including the A&D industry. As such, SBTI may establish aggressive timelines and rigid standards that don't factor in our unique circumstances. For instance, the equipment we produce have much longer service lives than most consumer products. Any science-based target must take this into account, and it's not clear the rule or SBTI would do so. Congress should be particularly concerned about the national security implications of the rule. If the Pentagon provides a total estimate of emissions, will the military then be bound to operate within those parameters regardless of the threats we encounter? Will disclosing this information publicly provide sensitive information, including data about next-generation platforms and use scenarios, to our adversaries? What is even more concerning from a security perspective is that this rule opens the door for foreign influence over U.S. government procurement. SBTI is led by foreign nationals and has no accountability to the U.S. government. The proposed rule taps into other international NGOs to solicit information regarding companies' environmental impacts and targets. If a contractor does not provide this information, or if SBTI does not approve their targets, then the contractor would be ruled ineligible for federal contracts. In other words, it gives a non-governmental international body the authority to determine which American companies can and can't do business with the U.S. government, including our military, all without regard to cost, schedule, and capability of what that company may offer. This rule also places unusually burdensome requirements on small and mid-sized companies that are part of the supply chain, at a time when the Pentagon and the defense community are concerned about the shrinking size of the defense industrial base. Companies, especially these small and mid-sized companies, increasingly cannot afford the costs of doing business with the U.S. government. This rule would become yet another market barrier that could turn companies in the defense industrial base to commercial work instead. A diverse defense industrial base is critical to our military meeting its growing mission set, and this rule would jeopardize that, even as a land war continues in Europe and the threat of conflict in the Indo-Pacific grows. The American A&D industry shares our government's goal of reducing carbon emissions. The proposed rule would place enormous, if even executable, burdens on industry, set up a regulatory-like process without the normal transparency and oversight we have come to expect in the United States, and put our national security at risk by making public, highly sensitive military data. Thank you again for having me, and I look forward to your questions.